Fintech Chatter. Brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Hello and welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where fintech leaders join me for a bit of a chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and in today's show, I'm joined by my friend Anthony Jones from Visa. As head of digital partnerships for Australia, New Zealand, and the South Pacific, Anthony and his team work with non-bank financial institutions and scale-up fintechs who are looking to embed payment products. With a focus on emerging use cases and capturing new payment flows, Anthony and his team have partnered with leading neobanks, BNPL providers, and crypto exchanges. But before I chat to Anthony, make sure to give us a follow on your podcast player and leave us a review. It really helps me promote the show to other fintech fans. Anthony, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you.
It is. It feels a bit odd sitting here all formal and professional with you. And normally we're having a natter and talking about our respective football teams at fintech events.
Exactly. But no, it's good to catch up and see you today and have a little bit of a chat about all things fintech.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks for hosting me today at the Visa offices down at Barangaroo. What a glorious way to start the day on Sydney Harbour.
No, it certainly is. It's nice weather out there, although a bit brisk this morning.
It is a bit brisk, but we're both British, right? We know what a real winter is.
You almost made that mistake of calling me English.
Yes,
I'm a proud Welshman, as well you know.
Yeah.
But you're right. You'd think that we'd be a bit more hardy to this type of weather, but it's not the case.
We could have always edited that out if I got it wrong. Although I think it might have been the end of the podcast.
I'll let you go.
Yeah, thanks. No, as you mentioned, we are here to have a chat a bit about fintech, and we've been, I think, kind of on a similar journey. We kind of sit, many times cheering from the sidelines, so to speak. But we also have I'd say a kind of really broad view of the market and see many different types of businesses in different spaces at different stages of their development as well. And, kind of that, I think one of the most important things is that bridge between, the kind of incumbents and the newer, more disruptive kind of elements within the space. So I'm kind of hoping you could share with us a little bit more about Visa and the role that you play in the ecosystem, but also I'm keen to get some of your views as well, Anthony, on just how you see the market now, what we've experienced this last 12 months in particular, what your views are and kind of where we go from here. But before we kind of head into that, could you maybe share with us a little bit more and expand on that intro that I gave about, your role at Visa?
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. So I lead our digital partnership team across Australia, New Zealand, and the South Pacific Islands. And the real focus for myself and for my great team is really to work with institutions and organizations. Some of them are scale-ups, some are traditional kind of fintechs, others are just non-bank financial institutions that are looking to add a payment element to the platform or capability or experience that they have. So whether that's a small business capability, whether that's something that's focused at commercial card capability, or whether that's something that's wholly focused in on consumers, our role is to help them, to educate them about the market if they're coming in from overseas, and then perhaps even take them down that path of becoming a principal licensee of Visa, or connecting them to one of our enablement partners that work in the ecosystem to bring their solutions to life.
So how big is the team, Anthony?
The team is pretty modest. So we have a team of 4 at this point in time. So our team is really broken down into business development and account management, so looking after those fintech and scale-up clients. So a lot of focus on bringing those new ones in. So a lot of kind of farming work that we do on that. And then also a lot of hunting, going out there and finding those new opportunities and obviously helping them grow over a period of time.
And in terms of kind of your clients and customers, are there any that you can kind of mention that you've worked with?
Yeah, there's a few that are publicly out there, and you can see their propositions in market already. So quite a few are homegrown organisations that are like, household brands in the Australian market. So if you think along the lines of Zip, and Afterpay as an example. Others are international organizations that have expanded into the Australian and New Zealand market. So Revolut, Wise, Crypto.com are classic examples of those.
Now, Visa, it's a brand that I think is just synonymous with credit cards. It almost is an incumbent role that they've got in the market. What is it that they've kind of seen, and particularly in this last decade or so, around innovation? Because it seems as if they've completely changed their perception, brand in the market of being a credit card business to now being a real digital innovator.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We always consider ourselves as the original fintech. We are probably the largest fintech organization in the world.
Come off it, mate, right? Like, I remember working in retail when I was 16 or 17 and getting a machine.
Just because we're the original fintech doesn't mean all of that swipe technology.
Yeah, swipe tech, yeah.
But obviously, connecting banks, connecting financial institutions, merchants and acquirers and issuers together with one network is not an easy task, and you build scale over time and ubiquity. The ability to see the Visa symbol everywhere and know that you'll be able to make a payment using your card is incredibly powerful. But you're right, innovation has changed dramatically over the period of time, over the last, 60 years of Visa's history. And particularly in the last 11 years, I've been working at Visa for 11 and a half years, and I've seen incredible innovation during that period. If you think about 2011, it was really the starting period of being able to tap with your card. Yeah. And contactless and PayWave became available and became ubiquitous across the marketplace. Now we see that globally. Australia has been one of the leading markets in relation to contactless technology, and it's all about making the experience seamless and as easy as possible for the consumer to make payments and for merchants to receive payment. Yeah.
Now, I was a little bit cheeky about the card swipe machines, but actually, Visa and your kind of main competitor are the first, I would say, kind of real fintech businesses that I can remember recruiting for. If I go back again, 13, 14 years. And what really struck me at the time was how small in comparison to, say, like a bank like a CBA, these businesses were in terms of number of employees. You kind of think of them as being, like a huge organization like a Google that's got 150,000 employees, but they're actually pretty nimble and agile businesses. And you talking about your team being 4 people. It's kind of reflective of a lot of the clients that you would serve, I guess.
You're right. I mean, we are a lean organization. We pride ourselves on that. We're technology-led. And as a result, you should hope that you don't have to rely on huge numbers of people to run the company. So, you can take a look at our annual report. You'll see that we have a touch over 25,000 employees globally. And a lot of those have been added in the last sort of 3 years. Yeah. So you can see that expansion during that period of COVID, really, more than anything else. And that's really indicative of the fact that we've expanded beyond our traditional network. We've adopted this network of networks strategy and approach. And as a result of that, we've built out our value-added services. So things that are adjacent to payments, but aren't the actual payment itself. Again, making life easier for consumers, for issuers, for acquirers, and for the merchants.
Now, we talked about your role as being, kind of Australasia, Pacific as well. What role does Australia play in the bigger global picture for Visa?
It's incredibly important. I mentioned before that when we look at contactless transactions, one of the markets that leads that is Australia. Around 99% of all face-to-face transactions are contactless. So that's one element of it. The adoption of tokenization within the Australian market is also incredibly high. So even though the population is relatively modest at 24 million people, we punch above our weight in terms of innovation. We punch above our weight in terms of the adoption of new technologies. Obviously, Australia is a wealthy country. We have a large penetration of consumers and businesses that use payment cards, whether it's ours or one of our competitors. So the adoption of electronic payments has always been strong within the Australian market. So definitely incredibly important to Visa as a whole and incredibly important to our Asia Pacific business.
So you've been big supporters of the fintech ecosystem as well. I guess not just kind of visibly in person at events, but supporting a lot of the industry bodies and kind of supporting those events as well. Kind of, what do you see as the kind of role that Visa has to play, certainly in the fintech ecosystem here in Oz?
Yeah, look, we take it very seriously. At the same time, we hope to have a bit of fun along the way. But the role really is to make sure that we're educating everybody who wants to listen about the role that Visa can play, the technology that we have, and the way in which we can help fintech scale-ups get to market. Now, if you go back a decade, Visa's main business really relied on large financial institutions, big banks typically, and big acquirers across the globe. What happened in about 2016, 2017 is that we developed our digital partnership team. And this was a global initiative that we led within Visa. Australia was one of the first markets to jump on board with that. And through that period of time, it was about making it easier for our prospective customers, fintechs and scale-ups, to work with Visa.
Yeah.
And what that meant was lowering the barrier of entry when it comes to licensing. So making it easier to become a Visa licensee, whether you're accepting payments or whether you want to issue cards to make payments. And then also some commercial incentives that sit around that. So when we're working with a fintech to help them in those early years to get set up and to give back some of our fees that we charge in the form of incentives so that we can help them along that journey.
Yeah. There's been some really good kind of, I guess, success stories, and also some, businesses that I think have kind of, would not have been able to kind of progress had it not been for the program that you offer. What are some of the kind of, wins for you and the kind of proud moments that you've got of businesses that you've supported?
I think what makes us really happy is when you see an organization that adds in card payments for the first time and they're working with us and we start to see them scale really rapidly.
Yeah.
We start to see them making a difference, providing a better user experience and delivering a solution that customers really want. So I think, without calling out too many names, but the growth of Zip over the last few years, the growth of Afterpay in the New Zealand market is another great example. And then the likes of Revolut and Wise, the way that they've transformed international payments and the support we've been able to provide, again, through the provision of issuance of Visa cards has been great, because what it means is that they've got more engaged users.
Yeah.
It means that their users have got more utility when it comes to using that capability, because on top of being able to move funds or buy something in 4 installments, they're then able to use a Visa card to buy things in more places.
Yeah.
That ubiquity that I mentioned before, 84 million merchants across the globe, the ability to walk into a store, whether it's in Saigon, whether it's in Sydney or whether it's in San Diego, and be able to tap your card and know that the Visa card transaction is going to go through. So I think it gives organizations, Australian organizations as well as international ones, it gives them that global appeal.
Yeah.
And like I say, that additional utility of the capabilities that they've built.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about that global piece, because I think one of the challenges here in Oz, and you've talked about 2 businesses that have kind of gone global from early days in Zip and Afterpay. What are the challenges for fintech scale-ups here in Oz to actually go on that global expansion path? And what are some of the things that you see that can be done well, and some of the things that maybe you need to try and avoid?
Yeah, I think when it comes to that path overseas, you've got to make sure that you've got customer fit for those markets.
Yeah.
Making sure that, yes, it might work in Australia, but for it to work in New Zealand or for it to work in the United States or the UK or Singapore, you've got to make sure that same customer fit exists. And also that the competitors haven't already stolen your thunder in those particular markets. If it's already occupied, then you might want to think of another market instead. So I think they're closely looking at that market research and also understanding the economic levers. Interchange is often a driver for revenue for business.
Yeah.
And you need to look quite carefully at that, because in highly regulated markets, that interchange revenue can be far lesser than in markets like the United States, as an example. So, making sure that you understand the economics at play, the customer fit, and then also not perhaps overextending yourself, particularly in the environment that we've got right now. Maybe it's better to focus on your home business and get that absolutely singing before you start to look at expansion overseas.
And all those things that you've talked about, in other markets, is that guidance that you're able to provide when you start working with scale-ups?
That's exactly right. And particularly, we see that in both directions, actually, Dexter. So whether that's a US or a European company that wants to expand to Australia and New Zealand, we spend a lot of time educating them about the local market.
Yeah.
We educate them about things like the types of products that might be available, maybe an indication of what the regulations might look like, and then also looking at interchange, that interchange revenue lever that I mentioned before, and what that might look like. It's often quite a shock for our US cousins that come to the Australian market to see how heavily regulated we are in relation to interchange. And in some instances, it deters them from entering the Australian market, because the economics just make it uneconomical for them to start this capability in this particular market. So that's a really important part. And we do the same in reverse. So when you've got an Australian organization that's looking at New Zealand or maybe Hong Kong or Singapore or the UK or Canada, helping them understand what the environment is in each of those markets, what the pitfalls might be, what the challenges might be, and also what the opportunity might look like. So bringing in my colleagues from overseas, so the digital partnership team in Canada or the UK, and getting their view on what that market looks like. Is it at saturation point in that particular capability, or is there an opportunity for an Australian organization to do really well overseas?
Yeah. Very familiar story to the one that I have around talent, similar discussions, which, I think people are shocked at the salaries. They're shocked at maybe, the differences in talent and the smaller talent pool that we have. But I think the thing that particularly US businesses, they seem to be most shocked by is the level of competition here versus the opportunity. I think oftentimes I might just look at the map and see this big country and think we're kind of comparable economy to the US, when actually California's a much bigger economy than what we are. So it can be a surprise. And look, it's great to hear that you're taking that real partnership approach as well of let's make sure we're the right fit for you before we go down the path of, kind of signing contracts together. Yeah,
it's a really important point that you just made, actually, because what we often see with organizations that are coming from overseas and want to expand into Asia Pac, the first market that's on their mind is Australia.
Yeah.
Often because they're English-speaking, from an English-speaking country. So they're looking for that commonality to enter into Australia, and then we take them through what it would actually look like if they were to bring that capability.
Right. In all the times that I've been doing this, you're the first person to mention English as a first language. Usually it's a similar regulatory environment. It's a launch pad into Asia. Nobody's ever been honest enough to go, we all speak the same language.
Well, it is. And if you look at things like user experience and user interface, and you want to launch an Australian proposition in Korea, you really need to think about what that looks like. Because what appeals to an Australian isn't necessarily going to appeal to a Korean when it comes to UI. So that's a really important part of it too. But obviously being able to converse with the local regulator, to work with your local team, you need to take these things really seriously. Google Translate will only get you so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that you've done a fair bit of work in the crypto space as well. I hate using that word. I'm trying to kind of move towards digital assets in terms of like tokenization. But this has been, I think, obviously, you could look at it two ways: massive opportunity or a massive threat to a business like Visa. What's the stance that Visa's taken on this, on the innovation in this space?
We like, and I like the term digital assets as well, actually, if we want to break that down. But there are some crypto exchanges that we work with too, so we can call it what it is from that perspective. But we see them as opportunities. Over 70 crypto exchanges have partnered with Visa to issue a Visa card in connection with their digital asset wallets. And the whole point of that is to make it easier for consumers to access the assets that they've accumulated. So whether those assets happen to be stocks or shares, or whether those assets happen to be gold or silver or Bitcoin or Ethereum, then the capability of having a Visa card that will that is there so that you can convert from those assets into a fiat currency and then tap your card at the grocer. That for us is really important.
Yeah.
So building out that user experience. So we don't see that as a threat whatsoever. We are incredibly interested in the capabilities of digital assets, whether that's stablecoins, central bank digital currencies, or whether that's the use of blockchain itself. And internally, we do an awful lot of work around those areas to ensure that we're really well placed for the future. So we have a crypto team. They are called the crypto team, who focus on those digital assets. And led by Kai Sheffield, who's exceptionally well known within the digital asset space. And we are very focused on helping governments, helping business, and helping individuals build out capabilities that are leveraging blockchain because we think that it's got great utility.
I loved what you said there around just, I guess enabling people to unlock the value in their assets. I think one of the kind of nirvanas or, the kind of dreams that I have of this space that we're in is that ultimately I think that's the way in which you can kind of overcome the discrepancies that we see in wealth and the unfairness of the system that we some of the unfairness that we have within the system is a lot of it is that people are sitting and they've got wealth, but they're unable to tap into it, or unlock that or unrealize the value in some of the assets that they have. I think it's kind of what Visa's doing is kind of a step really in the direction of a completely new world and system and financial system.
Absolutely. And we very much view ourselves as that bridge between traditional finance and digital finance and DeFi. So TradFi to DeFi. So we are that bridge that is there for you to be able to convert those digital assets into fiat, because most merchants still only accept fiat currency at point of sale. We only allow fiat currency to transfer across our network. So it's important that there's that conversion element prior to the transaction or immediately after the transaction takes place, so that the user, the consumer, has that ability to make those payments seamlessly and easily.
And there's obviously a lot of, still kind of gray area around the regulatory side to this. And I'm sure there's, changes and more changes that we'll see over the next decade. But from Visa's perspective, kind of where's the balance between risk and reward? And, there's obviously been a lot of kind of negative press and negative events over the last 12 months. How's Visa kind of navigating that to make sure that, one, you're protecting your customers, and two, you're protecting the brand, right, and the business that you've built over many, many decades?
Brand is incredibly important to us, and preserving that brand becomes a key part of what we do. Now, we don't pick winners and losers, Dexter. It's not our role to say, oh, this is going to work, this one isn't going to work, this exchange is going to fail, this one is not going to fail. But what we do is an awful lot of due diligence to ensure that there isn't excessive reputational risk, financial risk to consumers, and that we are working with decent human beings that are fit and proper persons to run that business. So we do a lot of DD in the background to ensure that we're partnering with the right partners. Doesn't mean that organizations won't fail, of course. And whether that's a crypto exchange or whether that's a bank, there are no guarantees from our perspective on who will succeed and who won't. But we do as much as we can to ensure that cardholders won't be impacted and that merchants won't be impacted.
When you kind of you mentioned there, Kai, and the team that he has and the role that he has, and the discussions that you've had with him, there any kind of developments, innovations, any regions globally that have kind of got you excited?
Look, again, one of the benefits of working for a global organization is that we tend to see a lot of great innovation from all over the world. And we share those innovations within our teams so that we can see the different use cases that are evolving, and that we can see the different ways in which a Visa credential or a Visa token is being implemented to make life easier for consumers and businesses. So along that journey, I think there's been an awful lot of interest in the central bank digital currency space. We've also seen some great usage of stablecoin, particularly in the way that platforms like marketplaces are able to disperse funds through to individual merchants in near real time. So of helping that cash flow capability, particularly if it's across borders. So the use of a stable coin or the use of a central bank digital currency can have some real application and some real benefit to those small business merchants in the future.
Fantastic. And in terms of, I guess, where Australia stands in your view of, we're obviously never going to, be able to compete with the US or Europe, but in terms of innovation, where would you say kind of where we're ranking at the minute, and what do you think we need to do differently or better to improve?
Yeah, look, I would challenge that, Dexter. I think Australia can compete at that high level, and I think we've seen some amazing innovation out of the Australian market over the last 5 or 6 years. The advent of buy now, pay later. I appreciate that it's a little bit more maligned at this point in time, but the way that grew and the use case that provided to solve a problem, particularly for an under 30-year-old shopper, was transformative. And as a result, those organizations, most of them came out of Australia, the one or two out of Europe as well, they grew it really, really quickly and became household names. So Afterpay and Zip have done a great job in that buy now, pay later or store credit type environment, which needed some innovation. Yeah. So I think Australian companies can take it out there and they can build some great capabilities that the rest of the world turns around and looks at and goes, wow, that's really impressive. The other part is that Australians do adopt technology really quickly. Again, I don't want to hark back to contactless payments, but it's a good litmus test of how quickly Australians really move towards a really fast.
I'm just smirking, right? Because I'm just thinking of the times that I would go back to the UK and I have to sign or pin, and I'm like, you guys not got contactless.
Yeah. Now, admittedly, the period of COVID meant that a lot of nations around the world played catch up. And we're now at the point where globally more than 50% of all face-to-face transactions are done in a contactless environment. So whether that's using your mobile phone to be that contactless device, or whether it's using a card with a contactless chip. So I think that innovation kind of wasn't built in Australia, but was adopted in Australia first. So Australians love technology, same for the Kiwis.
Yeah. We're obviously kind of not hitting headwinds. I think we've been right in headwinds over the last 12 months. What's your kind of message out there to scale-ups who are kind of gone through that journey, and the game has changed, the conditions have changed, it's more difficult to get funding, all of those things, starting to see the beginnings of a recession, less consumer spending, all of that's kind of coming together now. What do you see as being the way in which businesses can navigate through this, some of the things that they can be doing that might get them through this period, but also at the same time help them actually innovate their business models?
Yeah, and look, it's a great question, because I think for a long period of time, people thought that the tap would be on forever and cheap, easy money would be accessible for the foreseeable future. That proved not to be correct. And now we've started to see interest rates rising, and we've seen the capital markets certainly thin out quite significantly. It's about coming back to basics, Dexter. And I think it all comes back down to, do you have a product that is fit for purpose and a product fit for market? Are there consumers that want to use your product, and are you solving a problem? And if you can't answer yes to all of those, then you've got some real challenges and you need to rethink. The other thing is, what's wrong with starting a business and running it and bootstrapping it yourself for a period of time to build up some credibility, to build your underlying platform and start to attain customers, start to bring on some customers, then look to raise capital. I think we were getting it the other way around for a period of time, where on the back of a good idea, potentially a good idea, and a PowerPoint deck, there were people pitching for finance and getting fundraising rounds under their belt for a product that didn't exist yet. So I think it is about making sure that your product will sustain even difficult market conditions like this one, and that it really has a market application and that you've got consumers that you can sell to.
Cool. So on that, I've got two kind of questions, which are actually questions that I get asked a lot from my network. And I'm springing these on you, and they weren't something that we'd kind of anticipated. So if you're uncomfortable answering them, that's cool. But I think they're actually questions that you're really perfectly poised to answer. So the first one that I get a lot is, to your point around bootstrapping and earlier stage ideas, once they want to, kind of go out and they need access to, say, Apple Wallet, Google Wallet, those types of functionality, at what point does Visa kind of get involved and start supporting a business and can then, enable them to kind of get out to market and start to access, kind of technology like that?
Yeah, it's a valid question because it's not cheap to run a card program.
Exactly.
It's not inexpensive.
Which is my answer. Thanks.
Dexter, it takes resources. It takes human capital. It takes an awful lot of time. And it takes an awful lot of expertise. Yeah. And that expertise is not inexpensive either. Yeah. So you put all those things together.
And then you got the risk element of what as well.
Correct. You've got to get all of your fraud and security systems up to scratch before you even start, because your credibility could be ruined on that first transaction if it's not. So our advice is always to build up your customer base and then potentially look to outsource that capability rather than run it all in-house. Yeah. So we've built up a stable of excellent ecosystem enablers that can step in and provide that service on behalf of Visa. So if you think about the likes of Neum and Novarti and Shape and Indu and Cuscal and Airwallex, those are all Visa enablers. So they are principal licensees that can help a fintech organization build their capability. It'll be completely white labeled, so it looks and feels like the fintech's proposition, but in the background, it's being outsourced to somebody else. So we used to call them bin sponsors and program managers. I think ecosystem enabler is probably a better terminology for them, because they're providing a wide range of services to get those organizations to market. So rather than build it all in-house, look to partner, particularly if payments is not your core business. Yeah. If you're a crypto exchange, or if you're a buy now, pay later service, or if you're a small business invoice capability, then payments might be part of your proposition, but it isn't the central core of your proposition. So outsourcing those periphery capabilities of payments to somebody else makes an awful lot of sense from our perspective.
Other question that I've got for you, and look, this is the one it's actually not new. It was something that I was getting a lot in the last downturn that we had as well, and it's to do around partnerships. And I think oftentimes, the kind of nirvana is you get a partnership with Visa or CBA or whoever, and you sit back and just wait for their money to come raining in and pouring down on you, right? And it's just not that simple. There's a lot that needs to be done to make these partnerships work. What would be your advice, to those kind of scale-ups out there that are looking to partner, whether it be with Visa or anybody else, to get the most from a partnership with a global or big corporate organization? And what are some of the things that are kind of, you can't get away with, right? It's because scale-ups tend to kind of run a little bit faster and sometimes a little bit looser, and it's not necessarily the kind of right approach for a business like Visa.
Definitely do your homework first, because for an organization like Visa or for one of the big four banks in Australia, reputational risk is the one thing that we're all very laser focused on. And so ensuring that you've got the correct licenses, that you've got the correct people, that you've got experience within your organization. And if you are a payment-led or payment as your core capability, then you have to have the right professionals that have got a track history in that market. That gives you that credibility. So getting all of your ducks in the row, from a regulatory perspective, from having the right team in place, from making sure that you have the right platforms. Now, often it's much better, as I mentioned before, much better to go out and partner and buy something off the shelf that is already PCI DSS compliant when it comes to payment transactions, rather than build it from scratch in-house. That's a far riskier proposition. And should you be fortunate enough to partner or be acquired or invested in by a large bank, remember that they are going to expect to see some level of return. It might not necessarily be financial return from day one, but they're going to need to see some development. They're going to need to see some capability expansion. They're going to want to see you help them build their business. That's why they've invested in most situations. It's about how can you build out the user experience for their customers to a higher level and to give them a point of difference. So It's not easy money if you should get invested by a large organization like a large bank, because there's still going to be demands on you to deliver, and that reputational risk is going to be ever present. So it's about running a really tight ship.
Anthony, it's been fantastic to chat with you. Thanks for sharing everything about Visa. Look, it's great to hear that a global organization has got such strong values, with very similar values to my business, which is ecosystem first. It's fantastic to hear.
Thank you for your time. Really lovely to talk to you today, Dexter.
Right. Now, before you dash, we need to let people know where they can get in touch with you and what's the best way to follow you.
I had one job today. That job was to tell people how they can contact me.
Mate, this is the bit where you get the pitch, right?
I completely
call to action.
So absolutely. So you can go to visa.com.au, and there's actually a form there that you can complete, and that gets sent through to myself or my team, or else look me up on LinkedIn.
Yeah, or go to any one of the fintech events in Australia.
You'll see us there.
Well, Anthony, fantastic to chat with you. As always, folks, you can catch me on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. And if you're coming here for the first time, make sure to give us a follow, and don't forget to leave us a review. It really helps in getting great guests like Anthony onto the show. Until the next episode, keep well. Tier 1 people, leaders in executive search for fintech and the digital economy. We'll help you bring in world-changing leadership talent to build world-changing ventures. And you can find us at tier1people.com.